joining us for what promises to be an insightful and exciting opportunity to talk about new emerging business models for the web with two tech innovators. MozFest 2021 is a global rolling event live over 10 hours a day for 12 days. It's designed to focus on global access rather than fast-paced days. And our theme for MozFest 2020 is trustworthy AI. It's AI that's seeking agency and accountability. And this theme is seen across all activities, including our dialogue and debate series, including today's conversation with Ayman Hariri and Tony Fadell. And I'm Ashley Boyd, the Vice President of Advocacy and Engagement at Mozilla. I'll be hosting our conversation today. And let me introduce our guests before we dive into the conversation. Ayman Hariri is the co-founder and CEO of Vero. Born in Riyadh, Ayman lived and worked around the world, and it was this very experience that inspired him to create a social media platform that builds on this global network. Vero was designed to mimic real-world interactions and create a community where people can connect over shared passions. So we'll learn more about that work and what inspired him in this conversation. Tony Fadell is an active engineer, investor, and entrepreneur with a 30-year history of founding companies and designing products that improve people's lives. Currently, he's the principal at FutureShape, a global investment and advisory firm that coaches engineers and scientists working on foundational deep technology. He founded Nest Labs in 2010 and served as the CEO until 2016. And he's also held executive leadership roles at Apple, Philips Electronics, and filed over 300 patents for his work. So this is a true innovator we're talking to. And I'm really excited to talk with both of you. MozFest is really a convening place for builders and visionaries of all different varieties across the world and around different real disciplines that are required to create a more positive future for the internet. So I'm excited to talk with you both just about the innovative process and what we can do as a community with different expertise to really develop this visionary and better experience for all that I think we seek. And so MozFest is a place where we're coming together, and I think you have a lot of expertise and inspiration to share with our community. So I'm going to start us off really talking about alternative business models. And I wanted to ask each of you to share a little bit more about really this process of innovation. How do you go from a bold idea to really manifesting this in the world? And what are all the steps that we may not see because we haven't had your life experience in building products and really bringing them to the marketplace? What are all the steps between an idea and bringing that to the market? And I'm particularly interested also in thinking about what this community of co-builders and innovators can do to nurture that larger context and landscape of exciting ideas. So I'll throw it to Ayman for you, for you to start and lead us off here in this question.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about having ideas, I mean, it's easy to have ideas, but then it's the implementation of them that's the challenge. And what I always seek to do is put great people around me to be able to take sometimes ideas that don't have a form yet, it's more like a feeling, and turning it into something that is tangible. And it's important at all stages to always be focused on actually executing, getting it down on paper, recording things, coming up with some sort of production. Otherwise, it's just conversation after conversation around ideas. Which is fine, and there's a time and place for that in the process. But it's important always to be thinking an idea, when you go to execute an idea, there's always compromise. And you want to start understanding what that compromise is. Working in a team allows for different sides, different experiences, different cultural backgrounds to be put on the table and brought forward, which then make it more realistic to actually get the thing done, whatever the idea may be, whether it's software, whether it's hardware, whether it's a service, a product, an end user product, or a business to business product. Working with that in mind gives you a sense, after doing it a few times, that there are stages to any idea that an idea needs to go through, and you're looking forward to that next stage, and if you've baked it enough to take it to that to stage 2 and stage 3, and you keep that in mind. And if you're working with a good team, you're all keeping each other in check over going too far down the rabbit hole, and then sort of pulling back and saying, okay, we actually need to deliver something. What does it take? And so I would say initially just being free form, and then turning it into something more solid with the idea of execution, and doing it with discipline over and over again gets you used to doing it and being able to deliver product into the marketplace.
Tony, does that match with your experience?
Yeah, actually, that definitely does merge with my experience. What I've also found is that, I'm sure most of the people tuning into this today, they're very curious individuals, and they have a lot of ideas. Right. And so what normally happens is you have so many ideas that you have to really filter them out. Right. And it's not just ideas of one thing you want to do, but you have different ideas of all different things you want to do. So how do you first start with that? And the way I think about it, and because I used to latch on to the first idea I had, and I would run with it, and I would run fast. And I was like, oh, this is the best idea ever. And I'm like, commit everything, burn the bridges, we're going for it. And I've learned over time that isn't the right way to do it. I've wound up doing lots of cool stuff, but they were meaningless at the end. And the whole reason is that I didn't think about and break down the issues well enough before I committed to it. And so I think about this in a different way. So I say that great ideas chase me. They stalk me. They hunt me down. So I have a great idea, and I'll have maybe 20 or I think are great ideas. But then, there's that idea that you kind of go, yeah, all of them are like, yeah, it's great, but I've been there before. I've already tried. It's not good enough. And then after a few days, that idea comes back, and it kind of eats at your brain. And then a few more days, it eats at your brain. You're like, this is a good idea. And then you're like, now I'm going to start breaking it down into small parts and bits and pieces. And then I'm like, okay, now it's more manageable, but now I see some more risks. Maybe it's not so good. And then I break it down some more and go, good, more risks. And then I start talking to people about it that I trust. And then they're going, yeah, but did you think of this? And so you start to make this risk and risk mitigation and figuring out where the holes are and where the good ideas are and starting to prune. And so too many people I see, like you've heard those stories about where they go out to a dinner and they write something on the napkin, and then the next day they get funding and they're off running. That's the stupidest thing you can do. You need to sit here, and you need to, before you commit, start really breaking it down, really understanding risk mitigating, and getting other smart people, like Ayman said, to start contributing and helping you see it from different angles. And then when you get to a certain point, I'm not saying this goes on for years, but I'm also saying it doesn't go on for 24 hours, but you take a number of weeks, maybe months, to really figure out what it's going to take to build the team, what's the right expertise, understanding the markets, the customers, and then pulling in your community. And this is when you were talking about the MozFest community. I'm sure you have, people have great people that they tap into online or whatever, who can give them great critical feedback and help, so that you can go and get started in a more confident manner, even though you know more of the risks. The more you know of the risks and the more you think you know how to solve them, the more confident you get with the idea, as opposed to, you get faced with risks and challenges and all of a sudden you become dejected. You're like, oh, now I ran into another problem. Right. When you start a company, your whole job is just problem solving, and you're going to have problems. If you don't like problems, don't get into starting companies, because that's all you have. Your whole day is solving problems you knew were going to exist and problems you didn't know. And your biggest thing is trying to understand all the problems you're going to run into so you can figure out ways to get around them. And so you've minimized the ones that are going to be the oh shit moment when you're like, I didn't expect that, because you didn't surround yourself with the right people. So I think that's the first way of starting and getting your community to pull in and help you do that. That's the way it starts to funnel, and you get people behind you going, yeah, you got to do this now. You got to do this. And you'd be dumb not to. And then you're like, okay, now I'm on my way. That's the way I've always found it. But don't just, when you have your first idea, just run and chase it. Like, no. It's kind of like getting married. You may not want to just run and chase and get married the first person you see. You might want to take some time and figure it out and make sure it all works. There's a process.
That's really, really insightful. And I think it is a really good connection to MozFest. One of the MozFest taglines is, come with an idea, leave with the community. The community gives you the resilience, right? Of the multiple perspectives that you both mentioned about the people who've had more experience. I mean, Ayman, as you were talking, I thought, well, this is why people are serial entrepreneurs, because once you know how this works, you almost can, not that it's repeatable and rinse and repeat, but the process probably has some similarities from company to company that like really give you the confidence to keep going. But if you've never done that before, you need to work with an advisor and someone who has to contextualize and help you problem solve, as you said, Tony, and sort of.
And you're gonna fail. You're gonna fail.
You're gonna fail. So you need to have people around you.
Yeah, it's called do, fail, learn. Not learn and do. No, it's do, fail, learn. Do, fail, learn. That's what everyone's gonna go through.
So there's one question that I have for each of you that kind of pulls on a string that you mentioned a little bit in the background, which is sort of testing the market and sort of seeing where the idea lands. So you have an idea that haunts you, you can't let go of it. Love that image. And this is something I need to kind of pursue and check out. From my side, one of the things that we're trying to do at Mozilla is show the consumer appetite for new products and new ways. So we see, these polls that talk about how people are really concerned about privacy and security. They don't feel comfortable with a lot of products they're using, but they don't have an alternative. And so part of my job is to really continue to give people good information that grows their awareness and by default some of their concern, and then kind of demonstrates to folks like you that there are people waiting for new products. Is that something that you really look to when you're trying to validate an idea? Where do you even get that information to kind of signal there's a market and an interest more broadly than just among you and your colleagues?
Ayman, go for it.
Yeah, obviously market studies are important. And the way I try to approach things is both from a market study approach, but also from an instinctual approach. Like, if you start to hear things over and over, it's important to start developing an ear that hears what people mean and not necessarily what they say. And so if you surround yourself enough and you put yourself out into environments where there's sufficient amount of information coming from the people around you about the things that they need, and if you're able to translate them into product, I think that's a very, very important skill. One mustn't. You can start with a granular product or idea, just from the sense of just from a philosophic sense or a theoretical sense, and start to A/B test your way into a product that you'll find yourself out in space lost if you do that. But at the same time, I think being utterly closing yourself off from the world and not wanting to listen, I don't think that's the way either. So a healthy combination of the two. But it's also, I've been in meetings where PowerPoint presentations are put up with big spreadsheets and, about this is where the market is going and this and that and tons of market research, et cetera. But people aren't really listening to what's actually going on. And they've been wrong many, many times. I think it's important to really, the thing Tony mentioned before, and I'll mention over and over again, it's putting a good team around you who aren't a bunch of yes people. I think that's very, very important. One mustn't get enamored too much with themselves and their ideas, because there's fault lurking around the corner. There's a mistake. There's a oops, forgot about that, didn't realize that, hadn't thought about that around the corner, regardless of what a market is asking for and what you are proposing as a solution. And I think the more, the word fail that Tony said is extremely important in the process. And once you accept that there can be failure overall of what it is that you're doing, but then there are potentially that each idea could fail, and you accept that, it liberates you, and you're not having to be the genius in the room that's coming up with every idea all the time and be right. It's not about that. It's about a journey of discovery. And you go along the way and you see at the end how much of that original idea, if it's a basket of apples and you're and every time there's a mistake or something or whatever, a compromise that you have to make, as I was saying before, you have to throw an apple onto the ground. At the end of that journey, how many apples do you have in the basket? Is it the same? Is it different? Did you have to put other things in to make it whole again? If you accept that process, including listening to the marketplace, including validating, etc., I think that you have a healthy environment for ideas, creating product after product.
That's really helpful. Yeah, I remember once early in my career, I had my boss interviewed someone and said, I don't feel confident she would tell me no or tell me an idea was bad. And that makes me extremely nervous. I can't afford to have, an environment of people who want to please me. That's not what this is about. And that really stuck with me. And it sounds like that's a real principle for building teams for you to build companies and good ideas. Anything you wanted to add there, Tony, and just in terms of this idea of kind of reading the market and both what you're seeing now and what you anticipate, right? So what you see in the tea leaves.
Well, let's just kind of tie a bow around what Ayman was talking about, and I think that number one is, yes, you have to surround yourself with a team, but I think you also need to have an external team that is not as wedded to the outcome as you are, as the team is, right? Because you're searching and searching. Sometimes you just won't find it. But if you can have great independent voices that you can trust, it's not your mom and dad. Don't tell your mom and dad, oh, look, I got this great idea. They're always going to tell you it's great. Like, you want somebody who you really respect, who's going to be giving the honest truth of what they see. So you got to have that external voice. But the other thing you need to really understand, especially, again, at the very earliest days, like we were talking about the ideas that chase you, is that you have to know the difference between a fact-based decision and opinion-based decision. And almost anything that you're going to do that is really new and different is almost all opinion-based decisions. And no matter how much market data you get, how much customer insights or customer data you get, you are not going to be able to get the data to turn this opinion-based decision into a fact-based decision, a data-based decision. So you're going to have to trust your gut, and your gut is going to get, you're going to get some insightful comments. You're going to be able to build on things you hear that people are saying, that you've tested things, you've looked through the risks. But at the end of the day, especially at the beginnings of everything, there are opinion-based decisions, and you have to make sure that they're opinion-based decisions with one leader or a small team who's making the decisions, because you have to keep the vision whole. Because if it's always about facts and who somebody won because of it, and they're trying to make these opinion-based decisions into facts, like Ayman said, they're like an A/B test themselves out into nowhere space because they don't have a core of what they're trying to build. And I know when Ayman was doing the first days of Vero, he was doing it based on lots of opinion-based decisions of like, this isn't right, that isn't right, this seems to be right. And then he would modulate around that stuff. So at the end of the day, you got to really understand opinion versus fact-based decision. And the very first things you do are almost all opinion-based. There's a few facts like how much it's going to cost and how many people and stuff like that. But really understanding the markets and where you're going, it's a lot more feel and a lot more emotional than it is, this always logic, data-driven kind of thing.
And what I love about that is when you first started that, I noticed in myself that opinion-based decisions seem bad, and that no, you're saying own that. Like that's where that's the energy, that's the vision part of it. So like you said, don't sort of try to test it and boil it down to something that is so different than what you imagined, and just like, yeah, build into that opinionated place.
Right. And if you have the gut, if you have it in your gut and you know that, and this is what I learned, through my career, which is if you believe it and you can show it and you can have a logical description of what it is and how you got there, even though it was opinion based, but it wasn't data driven, people will sign on and believe you. That's how you build your team, is because, look, these are the problems that we have. I think these are the solutions. Let's go off and build this. And the more that you have it in your gut and the belief in you, people follow you because you're doing something that they can both emotionally feel and logically feel through the way you think about it. So you can build a following to get to that 1.0, to get to whatever it is, to then get real feedback from the market, to then modulate off of that. But the first thing, V 1.0, is all about belief in yourself, belief in the matter at hand, having logic behind it, and convincing people to go with it. And that's all opinion, and that's all, I don't want to call it sales, because it really isn't sales, but it's that belief in yourself, the vision. And my wife always says this: if you don't believe it, you can't achieve it.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're doing something new. No one's ever done it before.
Right. And you're sort of, you're having to push out into an unfamiliar territory yourself, and then also with users. So I kind of want to shift to talking about Vero in that sense of, this is a new product. You have created a social media alternative to Instagram with a strong privacy commitment, and you don't have ads on the platform. So there's a lot to unpack there in terms of the business model part of it. But I'd love to hear from you, Ayman. How are you moving from your strong vision and opinion-led building to really recruiting a user base with this idea? And how are you going to grow that community?
Yeah, I think, it's kind of interesting. When we first started, it was just an uphill battle to even have the conversation with anybody to say, we're starting a new social network. Sort of the answer was usually in a question like, why would you do that? Why go down that path? And I think what everybody is starting to see is the problems with privacy, and the problems with the business model, the current business model, which is free, which is having just a really bad effect on so many other parts of society and people's lives, everything from mental health to, just so many different aspects of our lives. And so when we're recruiting people, people are coming to us seeking an alternative. We're doing very little marketing today. We're gearing up to a big marketing push sometime this year. But up to now, what's been very interesting to see is just how many people have come to us purely looking for an alternative to what's out there. And I think it's a very different time than when we started, because now people have become very aware of the dangers of free and what it's actually costing everybody. And they're seeking something a bit more substantive, clear, and there's a very logical exchange between true customers who are our users, and the platform. And we've always said from day one, when we launched the app into the App Store, that this was going to be a subscription service. We've talked about it being charging a very minimal amount. We're looking just to be, first sustainable as a business. But more importantly, the whole idea of going subscription, or starting with subscription and being a subscription app, is that we treat all of our users as our customers. And so with that, it's a clear understanding of what role we play and what to expect of us.
And are you finding, I mean, I'm curious, it's so fascinating to watch the emergence of the subscription model because it feels so refreshingly retro in the sense of, oh yeah, we used to do this. And this was sort of a former business model that got sidelined for a bit. Is it something that you're finding people understand kind of the workings of it? Do they have questions that emerge just sort of in terms of how they relate to the business as a subscriber? Does it make them feel, I guess one of my questions in it is does it create more of a sense of co-ownership or kind of community because you have that upfront transaction? And how are you building that as part of the user experience or the building?
Well, to be clear, we haven't started subscription yet. We're not starting to charge just yet. Every user that joins Vero today gets it free for life until we turn on subscription, and then new subscribers after that will be charged. But the way we treat them, the language that we use, everything that is every interaction with our customer base is one where we treat them with respect. We treat them to make them understand that they're part of the community, and that's what we've built. It's really encouraging to see people not only looking for an alternative as in a feature set, but rather a feeling of belonging. And so there's this sense that where they're supporting each other. I mean, I know so many people on Vero that I don't know in real life that are there, that are always supportive. You know, if I want to celebrate something, I celebrate with them, and they're all there to join me in that. Or if there's something going on, like you know, raising funds for a foundation, they're all there. And you know, recently Zach Snyder was able to and Deborah Snyder were able to raise over $500,000 for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. So it's very much a community that's supporting each other and feels that Vero is almost a home, an online home for them. And I've heard that, you know, these are not my words. These are words coming from them, either directly to me or in Zoom calls that I've done with many of them.
Oh, that's lovely. I mean, there are real reasons that people cherish you know, social networks just for the reasons you've said. And so to have an ethical alternative like Vero seems like a really meeting the moment in terms of building, especially in this COVID world. People need these online connections. I know I've sought that more and more, but really have growing concerns about the platform. So I can see how those things are connecting. Tony, I'm curious, from an investor standpoint, there are a burgeoning number of subscription kind of models and other platforms. Are you seeing, I mean, is there a tipping point after which this becomes a little unsustainable? How many subscriptions can people have? Is this sort of the new normal? I'm just curious how you think about this overall approach to the web.
Well, I think that that subscriptions versus, you know, ownership, I guess you could say, versus being owned, right? There's being owned, owning, and subscribing. There are three different models. And I think people are really waking up to this owned piece, as Ayman said. But the difference between ownership and subscription, I think people want to have the ability to choose. Okay. And you want to give them both. Like, we're getting to the point where in some of our companies that are robots, where people can buy the robot with a subscription service for maintenance or whatever else, or they can just have the robot as a service and they just say, I need it for 3 months, and then they can give it back or whatever else. So they can try it in these things. I think that what we've learned in the world is that people have all kinds of different needs. And there's different things that they need at different times. Even in the same company, we have one company who in one division is buying or subscribing to a robot as a service, and the other one's buying the robot. It's the same company, but they have two different budgets, and the way the taxes work and this works and all that stuff in two different places in the world. They just decided that in the same company, they need both models. So I think that flexibility is key here with that, and that, you know, and that's on a B2B side, right? B2C, We're seeing that with shared services and you know, and rent to own or just rent. So I think it's just flexibility. I think that's fine. I think people will get a little bit crazy if, you know, they have to go to 10 different media services to get all of their content, and they need 10 different subscriptions, like what we're seeing, the balkanization or the fracturing of, you know, all of these different media services, so they can try to lock you in. At some point, there's going to be a natural backlash to that. So yeah, of course, there's always overdoing it, but I think flexibility is the key word here, and people have different needs. And so I don't think it's a bad thing, but I do think you have to understand when the subscriptions are for something that's to benefit the customer and choice, versus trying to lock them in for a business model that looks better for the street, but it's not better for the customer overall. And they're going to just throw their hands up and go somewhere else and just say, I give up with all this, you know, because I don't know how many media services there are now, but it's like you need 7 or 8 when you used to only need 1 or 2. You know, everyone said, oh, cable cutting the cord or cutting the dish or whatever it was. So you had 100 channels. Now you need 80 services to get those 120 channels. Like, is that better? It costs more, you know? So there's a natural, you know, cycle to these things.
Right. The pendulum. Yeah. I saw a tweet of someone saying, I don't know how to read all my Substacks. You know, I need a system to organize all of that. So I think we're nearly done here. Oh, okay. Well, that's all the time we have. I have many more questions, but this was really a wonderful insight into this exciting new company and the context in which you all are working to build exciting new innovations that really support people having a better experience and really taking more ownership of their experiences online. So I really appreciate the time and your collective work. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Ashley.